Hello, Pod Smashers of the Internet, and welcome to another episode of
8-bit Pod Smash.
Where Gaming Goes to Grab a Beer. Whoa, that blew up everywhere. I made a mess.
We are your hosts, Penguin and Termite. I am Penguin.
I am Termite, and we are a weekly video game podcast smashing together ideas that you care about with video games.
Right, and this is the week of Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving!
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. And we are doing our Thanksgiving. We always do an episode on Thanksgiving. It's getting harder and harder to come up with Thanksgiving-related topics each year, and we may be scraping the bottom of the barrel, but we're talking about family this week and how family and gaming interact, like the idea of family and family dynamics and how all of that relates to what we call gaming and gaming culture, industry, all that stuff. So hopefully it's got some depth, and hopefully it's like lighthearted and fun. It makes you feel good, make you feel close to your family, but we'll also maybe try to provoke your mind a bit too tonight. But, you know, Thanksgiving and the holidays in general, this time of year is all about family and being with your family and trying to appreciate your family. And we understand there's pitfalls with that too. We understand that not all families are functional and not all families are healthy environments too. But family is more than just the family you were born into. It's also the family you choose. So no matter who, like what the genetic makeup of the person that you consider your family is, family's family. And so we hope that you're spending some time embracing yours this holiday.
Yeah.
And that's why we're doing this episode. But we'll get into all of that and more. But we are, first and foremost, we're Gaming Goes to Grab a Beer. So I'd like to hear what you're drinking tonight, Termite.
I am drinking, I think, what is going to be the very last of any sort of Oktoberfest. This is
nice.
an Oktoberfest lager from Green Flash called
Goodbye.
October Flex, and it has a picture of a German dude wearing the suspenders and short shorts you would think with the long socks that is like very muscular. It's from Green Flash Brewing. I got it at Total Wine in that little mix that I got before, aka Flex Beer Prost. Raise your glasses to this crisp and bright Oktoberfest beer brewed with New World malts featuring notes of floral, vanilla, and subtle fruit and just a hint of spice. So Green Flash is from San Diego. They had a little bit of a brewery in Virginia Beach area here in Virginia, but I just bought this at Total Wine. So, yep, there it is. It's probably the last of the Oktoberfests. It's one of those craft brew versions of Oktoberfests that are better than like Sam Adams, the mainstream ones.
But also not better at the same time.
But kind of harder to find, a little more expensive, which makes Sam Adams still like awesome and kind of the go-to Oktoberfest beer. But this is really, really good. It has all of the vanilla and maltiness and deliciousness you would expect from an Oktoberfest. It's actually really, really good and crisp, so I enjoy it. I recommend it.
Very cool.
You might not be able to find them anymore by the time this podcast airs, because Oktoberfest is a month old.
Exactly. All right. But I don't know. I feel like they'd still be on the shelf for, especially not the like, surprisingly in this case, I might say, especially not the like Sam Adams kind. Like, I'm sure you'd be able to still find Oktoberfest if you were an enthusiast. At a place at least like Total Wine. So. Cool. Mine is also one from Total Wine, since apparently we both had a trip there. I remember last week you said that you were inspired to go there because of me.
Yes.
So I got Boulevard Brewing Company out of Kansas City. Has a Tank 7 American Saison. I love Saisons. Prizes, once again, this round of beer I got makes me think more of like a spring collection than an actual fall collection of beer. But I love Saisons so much, and I like they're kind of sweeter but also stronger than, you know, like a normal like wheat beer or whatever. And I don't know, I thought I was inspired, you know, it's an American Saison, so I was inspired by American Saison to pick it for an American holiday. But it's really good. It's sweet. It's a little bit more bitter than I expected it, but not overwhelmingly so.
Yep.
And it's got a very nice like sweet tartness, crispness, almost like a cider, like a beer version of a cider. And
nice.
So I'm into it. It's good. Really good.
Perfect for fall.
Absolutely.
Maybe.
Yeah, perfect.
Saisons are usually a summer thing, but
I think of them as spring. Like this is my, and I couldn't necessarily like explain the difference there, but that's how I just think of it as a spring thing. Like,
all right, there you go.
I don't know. Floral, maybe it's the floral because they always have like floral notes, and so I associate the like floral notes with spring. But this almost does taste like it should be more of a fall thing. It doesn't quite have as much floral going on. Much more crisper and bitter. So yeah. That's what I'm drinking. That's what we're drinking. So I wanted to talk about tonight now as sort of our intro bantery time, I wanted to talk about the episode we just recorded with The Flock,
Yeah.
Virginia-based podcast here in Richmond, centered out of Richmond. They reached out to us, but yeah, they reached out to us and asked us to be guests on their show because they liked our content and they liked that we were also based out of Virginia. And so we did an episode with them a couple of weeks ago. So apologies for not plugging it ahead of time. I wish we kind of had the foresight to plug it so that we could have, you could go listen to. It would have been fresh content. So it's a couple weeks old now at this point that you're listening to this in Thanksgiving. But hopefully we're going to get like some social media, the week that it aired to get people ahead of it. But if you haven't seen those social media posts, just know that you can go listen to that now. Do you happen to have their site and their...
I see one. I'm just going to go with that. The Flock, FLOCK, podcast.simplecast.com.
Nice.
And they have on that website a little description. They are video games, anime, TV shows, movies, and more every week from your 3 favorite boys.
That sounds like them.
Yep.
Yeah, they're awesome. That may sound like a simple premise for a show, but they're really interesting guys that all have really cool perspectives on gaming. And their structure's a little different than ours. They're also not family friendly, so you might hear Termite and Penguin make some naughty jokes that we wouldn't normally make in our show. So just a fair warning there. But they have. It's not just like a bunch of dudes being like, "So I'll play Call of Duty this week." No, they play interesting. They have very different tastes in games, and they play interesting games, and then use that discussion of what they're playing to be a jumping off point to discuss things, kinds of same things that we talk about too on our show. So cultural things and just like experiential things. And it's fun. It was a really good time. And it was fun to be a guest on someone else's show and kind of follow someone else's format and someone else's lead. So we're going to return the favor and have them on our show in a few weeks. And so you'll get to experience more of them if you're not inclined to go check them out. But we really hope that you guys do go check them out.
Termite did talk about playing Call of Duty on that show.
You did, actually. Yeah, you were if anyone talks about Call of Duty on this show, it's us. So
yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. So cool. Yeah, we hope you check that out. It was just a lot of fun. So
it was.
Anything else that you wanted to talk about with that? The funny story there though is that we actually recorded with them several weeks ago and got all the way through that entire experience, only to find out by the time it was time for us to sort of submit our MP3 to them, my audio was apparently entirely lost, and that's the first time that anything like that's ever happened to us. Where we got through a full, like, usually we have some kind of indication something's wrong, the audio changes or something, or the levels aren't showing up on the display, but everything checked out. And then when it came time to like download the file from our site, it was a 12 second, was it 12 seconds or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Like just nothingness. And that was pretty frustrating. But it was an experience, right? And we ended up getting to have 2 full conversations with them, one of which you can listen to, the other one which has gone to the void forever.
Yep. So, no one ever will hear that.
I know, it's sad, but
yeah,
it was great to be able to have 2 opportunities to get to have like conversations and get to know these guys. And it's awesome that they're based out of Richmond. So yeah, pretty cool.
Another special thing about this episode in our banter segment is that this will be the very first Monday that Termite is completely moved and has no ties to Fredericksburg anymore.
Are you sure?
Yes, the Monday, the 22nd, is when my children will be in their new schools. My wife will be in her new job for the second week, and it's the week of Thanksgiving, so Termite's taking the week off to unpack and settle and get kids needed to be where they need to be. So, yeah, this is the very first...
for Thanksgiving? What are you going to...
We're going to travel back to Fredericksburg. Okay. We're just going to pop in and have a meal and go home. We can't host, so we're not, of course, we don't have anywhere to sleep, like as far as anyone hosting us. So
we'll have no more ties to Fredericksburg except, going back in a couple of days to eat some turkey.
Right. I meant like my own ties.
I know.
Yes, family live here, friends are here. You can invite me anytime you want to Fredericksburg area. I am only an hour and a half away, at the least.
Wait, so you're not going to the moon? We just had that conversation. Or the
We're going to
Mars,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, I'm going to Mars. You might as well think of me in Kenya, I think was mentioned. Like,
yep, Kenya.
I'm halfway around the world, so I guess an hour and a half away from Fredericksburg is more like halfway
pretty
around
much,
the globe.
Yeah, that's how it feels to me. So
just tack on an extra 40 minutes of driving to your time to see me, and there you go. That's all it is. It's really not that far.
Good luck. Well, I mean, it's fine. The show is going to go on. This show is going to go on. We're not going to stop talking. So
And
It's not like this is an actual goodbye. It's more of just
see you later.
Well, not even see you later. Just like, all right, I'll continue talking to you on Slack like I've been doing for the last year, right? So,
yep. But even our get-togethers will just be,
of course, yeah,
probably the same frequency they've been through the pandemic, if not more, as the pandemic goes away. So, it's fine. It'll be fine. It'll be.
And when we do start traveling regularly back to that area to visit family, you're also on the way.
Yes.
So it's like, hey, we're coming
pop
through.
In,
we're gonna pop in, hang out for a bit. Yep, exactly. Yeah. So it'll be fun. It'll be good.
Yep.
So, you guys, obviously, we've had lots of coming to terms with this huge, massive life change, and I've been seeing a therapist. And
yeah, I mean, whatever you got to do.
Not wrong. I have been seeing a therapist, but not for this. Speaking of which, real quick, last little banter before we move on to our segments. The first major side effect of my Adderall, beyond the manageable stuff, has like cropped up, and that is I already have a predisposition to bruxism, which is clenching your jaw. And it usually was a mild problem, very mild problem for me at night. And but it's been getting to the point where even before I was taking the Adderall, my dentist was like, yo, you should get a mouth guard. And I'm like, all right. And they're like, you can get a custom one with us for $500. I was like, any chance insurance covers that? No. No, thank you. I'm good. But now it's happening during the day. Like now my Adderall, for whatever reason, I've just noticed it. And it's causing like headaches and stuff.
Yikes.
Like, so
that sucks.
It does. So I mean, I just messaged my psychiatrist about that today, and she pointed me in the direction of something a potential remedy that I'd seen online. Apparently magnesium supplements can help. So I'm going to look into grabbing a bottle of magnesium supplements and see if that makes a difference. So our teeth drying out and grinding together are not our favorite things, but
doing this podcast is our favorite thing. Favorite Things is a segment of our show where we just talk about the thing that we're digging this week, something that happened to us. It could be super profound and deep and meaningful. It's like an interaction with your spouse or your loved one or your children, or as shallow as I had this awesome sweet potato fries at this restaurant. However you want to think about it, whatever it is.
That sounds so good right now.
Okay, I guess I hit a nerve on that one.
I'm so hungry.
Yeah, it's Favorite Things. So you just talked a bunch. I'll go first.
Yeah, do it.
In preparation for the move, in which we will have been fully ingrained at the time listening to this podcast, but we record ahead of time, we had to do what is called an orientation, because where we are moving is a community called co-housing. Legally, by the county, it is considered a condo, but all of the things that administer all of the stuff in the community are the members of the people that live there are members to, I don't know how, I can't use words apparently. It's a co-housing community, and all of the things that would normally be used to manage a condo are done by the residents of said community. So the residents of this community are divided into committees, and there are meetings that happen regularly. There's a drumbeat of budget meetings and committees to allocate funds and pledges of all of the what would normally be considered like condo fees and how to manage the property. There are things like work shares, where stuff like painting fences and doing landscaping are all done by the members of the community together. Instead of hiring contractors, it is to drive the costs down and to encourage community. So there was an orientation about like how to be a citizen of this community and all of the things. So we had my parents watch our children, and we drove down to our new community, and we sat on the front porch of a lovely resident who invited us to her front porch, and another neighbor who walked across, who are the like marketing committee leaders, I believe. I don't know all of those terms to use yet, but it was an absolutely wonderful and amazing conversation sitting on the front porch on a crisp 45-degree morning with some hot tea, discussing all of the things that our new community and our new life will look like. And we went through all of the details about like where the trash is and how does the internet get provided to our home and what is the sewage and what is like recycling and all of the ins and outs of our day-to-day life in this community will look like. That is my favorite thing, mostly because it was a chance to get away from packing and fixing our home and children and yard sailing and all of the other very stressful things about this move that we have gone through since. It was just like a breath of fresh air. And of course, Charlottesville, and specifically the Crozet area, is gorgeous. So we were sitting at the base of a mountain looking at our new home, like 2 blocks down the way. All the kids were out playing, and people were out doing their Saturday morning stuff. It was just really cool to like be in the midst of that new community, and we're very, very excited and chomping at the bit to get there and be able to plug in and be a part of these committees, be a part of the decision making that goes on, and how this residence, all of the members will like work. So that is my favorite thing. Just sitting on the front porch on a crisp Saturday morning, drinking hot tea, and anticipating our new neighbors and how much fun
Just
all
quick,
of us
quick
are going
tiny
to have.
question, just because someone's got to ask it.
Yeah.
Are you absolutely 100% certain this is not a cult?
Cults usually have a sort of like charismatic leader or an authoritative figure, and there's none of that.
All
So
right.
no.
Just like if someone walks up to your door in like robes and a hood when you move in, just like maybe really quickly call me and we'll have a discussion.
Yeah. We'll talk about that.
I'll be there in like what you say, hour and 40 minutes?
Yeah. The appropriate question is this a commune? And then the appropriate response would be like, it's like a commune light. We have our own space. It is our own house. It is a private residence, and we can do whatever we want inside of our own 4 walls. But everything outside of our house does belong to a common community. So we have to treat it with the respect that you would give a common community.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
My favorite thing is pretty simple. This week, the Elden Ring gameplay, 15-minute gameplay showcase was
good.
like dropped. And
looked pretty dope.
It looks good. It's fun. I mean, what I appreciated about it was they showed that like instead of just like in the past they've done like the first opening level or whatever, right? Like up to the first boss or something like that. And I'm glad they showed like little bits and pieces from different parts of the game, right? They showed off co-op. They showed off like what the dungeons look like. They showed off the open world and the map. They showed off like some of the encounters that you'll have in the open world, like a big dragon fight. There's like boss fights in the open world too, and then there's like treasure chests you can go after, and it all looks so good. It looks very, very awesome. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on it, I did just talk about it on the Phlox podcast, so you can go back. You can find that and listen to hear more thoughts. But I'm very, very excited. The network test will drop next week, and the people they've chosen for the network test will be receiving emails tomorrow.
Ooh, maybe I'll get one.
So I know. I'm hoping you do. I'm kind of hoping you do, only because, again, they've made a point to say that in their marketing or whatever, they're really interested in trying to like attract the attention of people who haven't played these games before. So
That's
I could very easily, I mean, they literally asked the question, how many of these have you played before? And you got to check that magic, box that says none of them. And so I'm actually wondering if they are going to choose you for that reason alone. I also, of course, hope to get one, but we'll see. I just want to see, again, people are gonna. They say that the funny thing is that they're like, there's going to be no streaming allowed. Like you have to sign a thing that says no streaming or broadcasting of the gameplay allowed or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that ain't going to happen. People are going to be.
Well, I will abide by that. If I get
of course,
picked.
I would too. But it's just kind of funny that like people absolutely will be violating that.
Yep.
It just looks so good, guys. It looks like everything.
And girls.
And girls, guys, gender neutral. If you asked me 5 years ago if I would play an open world, super challenging Souls-like game, I'd have been like, heck no. No. Like, even open world games at the time, I was not turned on to until 2017 with Breath of the Wild. So, yeah, it's literally the game it's the game I thought I would never love, but do. So, it's highly anticipated as far as I'm concerned. But cool. That is our favorite thing. So let's move on to our final segment before our topic about family and do DLC. DLC is a segment that stands for downloadable content because our names are Dan, and it is a segment of our show where we have a fun little game discussion that is sort of tangential to our topic and is a conversation you wouldn't normally have about video games. I think I've got a fun one tonight. I want you to, without saying any names or calling anyone out, I want you to compare a family member of yours, either positively or negatively, to a video game character. And it's not about guessing who it is. It's literally about you being like, this person in my family has the same similar qualities as this video game character. And the point of this is to just simply think about a video game character, not like try to call that person out. So that is the prompt, because we're thinking about family. So I'm assuming you will have to have some time to think about it, unless you have one off the top of your head.
I do have one off the top of my head.
Go for it.
Deacon St. John
I actually
from
had a
Days
feeling you were going to
Gone.
say that.
And I'm actually bringing up his character profile because he is kind of like my dad.
Oh, okay. I was going to say you didn't have to say that, but I was going
Yeah,
to say you could just
that's fine.
describe why this character reminds you of this family member and be vague about it. But
well,
no, you're just like, he reminds me of my dad. But it's
Well,
fine
he's a
because
biker.
I'm
which
pretty sure
is
you've talked
my
about
dad.
that before. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which is why I thought about him immediately.
And the only difference between Deacon St. John and my dad is that my dad would not be a member of a club, and Deacon is. He fell into a club in the game, but it doesn't really matter. So that's why I'm making this comparison to begin with. So Deacon St. John's membership to this club has nothing, and that's the only delta between him and my dad. But the protection of his spouse or his wife, and like all of how he goes through this post-apocalyptic, the survival mechanisms. Yes, he's riding a bike. Yes, he has that like outlaw kind of mentality, like skirting the rules, like doing what it takes to survive. It was definitely like reminiscent of my dad in that regard. So yeah, if you have not played Days Gone, the game is so good and so complex.
It's on my list again because I have it in the PS
it's so
Plus
good.
collection, and I definitely want to circle back around to it at some point. I don't. You pointed out before 2022 is going to be lit. I have no idea when.
Yep.
But like again, like they made improvements to the game, and from when it launched, and we talked about how it was kind of like disappointing when it came out, but kind of got a cult following afterwards, and that's I'm interested in giving it a shot at some point.
Yep.
Nice, good answer. I'm gonna go with Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn. You can tell that I'm excited about this game as well. As much as I'm excited about Elden Ring, I'm also very excited about Horizon Forbidden West. But and you did the direct comparison, and so since this is a favorable comparison, I will say that Aloy actually reminds me a lot of my mom. I think it's why I like the character so much, and I'm in an interesting phase of my relationship with my mom in that she visits every week to. As I mentioned before, she visits pretty much every week right now to help with the grandkid or help with the kids. And because of that, I don't ever feel like I get to see her and talk with her. And it sucks because I love talking with my mom. And it's just one of those funny things where it's like, I literally see you once every week. And I don't think I've had a conversation with you in months just because I'm working and she's watching the kids to help out. And so like we take advantage of that time to get stuff done. But I don't actually get to take advantage of time with my mom. But why she reminds me of Aloy, both are very like empathetic. Like, so that it's the sort of empathy. One of the things that makes Aloy, I think, a really powerful character is that she is a badass while also being like very tenderhearted, but not in a like stereotypical way, not in a like she's a woman so she's in touch with her emotions kind of way, just in a genuine like she cares about people and is willing to listen. And that like genuineness is exactly my mom. Like my mom is so like very much like she's the best listener I know, like the single best listener. Like I have had so many rants and raves and just blah blah blah, blah going off about any number of like inane things to my mom, and every single time I feel like I'm listened to. It doesn't matter if she agrees with what I'm saying. It doesn't matter if she even cares about what I'm saying. Ultimately, as far as the grand scheme of things, she makes me feel like I've been listened to. And that is, I think, something that Aloy, like one of the strengths of that character. So yeah. And also the idea of like being willing to question her beliefs without necessarily abandoning them, right? Like that's something I think that Aloy demonstrates, of being like, she doesn't look down, like as she begins questioning the world around her and the things she's been taught, she doesn't do so in a way that like disrespects those who still believe them. Instead, she just goes on her own journey. And again, that's kind of something that I learned from my mom as well, is like, just because you're questioning things and maybe trying to change your mind or mindset about things doesn't mean that you have a right to judge other people for not doing that, right? And that, I think, again, reminds me so much of my mom. So I think that's probably one of the reasons why I really gravitated towards that game, because subconsciously I'm like, this is my mom. So one of the best.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So cool, awesome. Well, that's DLC. We want to hear about your family members and what video game characters they may or may not remind you of. So hit us up in the places that Termite's going to tell you right now to share those DLC related thoughts.
You can find us at 80bitpodsmash.com, 80bitpodsmash.com. That's our landing website with links to all of our social media outlets with which you can give us your thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, and ideas at Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, and Twitter, as well as we have a Discord server in the links to all of our show notes. And our show notes can be found at 80bitpodsmash, 80bitpodsmash.com, which is that same website where we have links to all of our podcast platforms. Our RSS feed, you can throw it into any third-party app, but we also have links for your convenience at Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, etc. There are so many ways in which you can get in contact with us, so let us know what video game characters you relate to your family members and more, and how your family in gaming relate in general, like we're about to jump into soon with our topic here. So let us know. Give us your thoughts and feedback. 80bitpodsmash.com.
I'm really excited about this episode, man. I like talking. This is one of those interesting ones that kind of just like came to me in a bolt of inspiration. I was like, what else can we talk about with Thanksgiving? I was like, we've done food. We've done giving thanks, like the idea of being thankfulness.
Mm-hmm.
But we did football. I was like, what's left? Parades?
Right.
Video game characters that show up in the Macy's Day Parade. The idea came to me to talk about family because we haven't really done
this
that
is a
yet.
great topic. Yeah.
And I think that it's way more deep of an idea than it might seem like on the surface. So with that in mind, transitioning now fully into this conversation about family, I think it's probably fair at this point to really kind of, for the purposes of the show, define and put boundaries around what we mean by family. Because as I mentioned on the onset of the show, there is this wonderful, amazing, and very important, but also sentimental idea that family is this thing that you choose for yourself, people that you surround yourself with, that bring you joy and are the most impactful in your life, that they are your family. And I ultimately agree with that idea, that like family does not necessarily mean your genetic, precursors and, most closely related genetic individuals. However, knowing, of course, that there is, again, this very complicated idea of wonderfully complicated idea of family, as it relates to gaming, in the conversation I want to have about it, I do want to kind of focus on the family unit, the genetic family unit, in its most functional capacity, knowing, of course, that not everybody has that. So I just wanted to be upfront on the end of being like that, like, if you had a dysfunctional family, if the people that you are genetically closest to do not feel like your family, that is a very valid position to be in. And we do not want to make you feel like you're excluded from this conversation. But gaming has an interesting role in that family unit. Gaming has an interesting role in the relationships that we were brought up in, whether they were functional or not themselves. There's sort of a changing shift in the way that gaming relates to and has related to family in the past. So that's what we want to focus on, I think.
You mean like family as in the people you live with, and if you're gaming, then it's the people that your gaming habits would directly affect because you are in close proximity with them?
I think so. I think I would say in this case, I'm mostly talking about the people that you grew up with and the people that raised you, as sort of like that combined. So again, I know that is a painful topic and a dysfunction, that could have been a very dysfunctional thing for some of our listeners. So I just want to be upfront about the fact that we understand that. In this conversation, we're going to be focusing on the most functional version of that, I guess.
I see.
Does that make sense? Right. Yeah. So
it's important that
so
we're not talking about nuclear families. We're talking about step families, single parent families, families headed by two unmarried partners, either of the opposite sex or maybe the same sex, households that include one or more family members from a generation.
If you were raised by
adoptive families, foster families, and families where children are raised by
guardianship,
grandparents.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
The people that you exactly.
Yes, all of those things.
But it's not, what we're not talking about is like your college friends who you have wonderful close relationships with that you consider your family now.
Why not?
Well, I mean, that's like, they may have a role in this conversation, but it's not the main emphasis of it, because I really want to talk about this idea of this, the people you grow up with and the people that raise guardianship. Yeah, that's probably a better sort of overarching idea. All right, cool. With that boundary set up, let's start with the history, right? Like, let's talk a little bit about like what's happened in the past. What is this history of this relationship of gaming and family, and how has gaming's effect on the family been historically perceived? So what I mean by that is like when people of the 1990s or 80s talked about video games and its effect on the family, what has that effect typically been perceived as?
Well, because gaming is still very new, coming out in the 70s and then like in the arcades in the 80s and 90s, we're just now seeing like our generation, the millennials, are now the first like kids grown up playing games,
Yep.
now becoming parents.
Yep.
So how has it historically been? It's been parents who know nothing about games looking at video games as kind of a distraction or a way in which a kid can be slothful and lazy or distracted or addicted to something that drives them away from success. It is a problem. It can incite violence. Playing games like Mortal Kombat and Grand Theft Auto allow a child to like flourish in its ability to become violent and angry at society and do heinous things. And like, so that's like kind of the reputation that video games have had.
Yeah, it's a very antagonistic relationship between the family and gaming culture, right? It did not help at all that gaming was targeted, especially in the 90s, was like the advertisement, everything was targeted towards like prepubescent and pubescent boys, right? And so all of the worst versions of that were what like games were. So again, there was sort of this, this is juvenile, this is for kids, and it's, that at the very least, at its most benign, it was perceived as something as like, this is something your boy kids are going to be into that they'll hopefully grow out of, right? Like, and emphasis on the hopefully. And then beyond that, it was, in the more negative, like you said, it was just like actively perceived as something that was destructive. This is, if your kid gets addicted to games, it's going to destroy your family life. And you know what? There is some truth to that. And we're actually, it was even less that in the 90s and 80s when it was like there was a moral panic around it, versus like now, yeah, gaming is something that if not carefully curated could destroy your family in a lot of tangible ways if left unchecked and let run rampant. So, I'm not saying it was all unfounded, fears or criticism, but it doesn't change the fact that like there was an inherently antagonistic role that video games seem to play in the family unit of the past, of the family units that we grew up in, certainly.
Yeah, and if you go like look at the dialogue that was exchanged in Congress around like Mortal Kombat and the rating system, ESRB's formation and through the ESA, that's the Electronic Software Association, like the gaming industry had to rally around itself to avoid some congressional litigation. And so like, that's awesome. But if you go look into the details of any of that, that's through the context, through the lens of like family and quote, protecting our children.
It was like, that was the conversation. That was the bludgeon that was wielded against the video game industry. It was like, think of the family. And like, and again, there's sort of been this sort of deconstruction of what the family is, and that has been absolutely necessary over the last like 20-30 years. But 20-30 years ago, family values, quote unquote, were like a still like valid political talking point that was not met with derision, right? Like it was one of those things where it was like, any politician that was like, every politician, I should say, in the 90s was like, I believe in family values and all of the, subtle dog whistling that comes with that. And at that time, again, the family was just perceived of sort of lifted up on a pedestal as like, it's the most important thing, right? Of course, we must protect family at all costs. So it could be a bludgeon wielded against, the video game industry when it was seen as something that was destroying the family. Yeah. Totally.
But even back then, there was a whole like nuclear family veil that has now been torn away. Like you said, like the deconstruction of that. It was the reality back then. It just wasn't acknowledged. And like the nuclear family was what was held up on a pedestal, is what was considered normal, but it wasn't. Most of America still did not have the nuclear family as a thing.
Well, and
I digress.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a whole, it's fun, and we're not going to get into it super deep, but there's a whole, like, there's a reason why. Right? Like there's the reason why nuclear families were sort of the thing that was,
white supremacy, racism, and patriarchy. Did I say those things out loud?
Oh,
yikes.
No. Oh, you're so woke and you're going to be canceled because of your wokeness. No, I don't know. I don't know how any of these things work. No, one of the reasons why the family was seen as so, or was sort of given all these exaltations is because in a capitalist society, a family is actually very profitable, right? You have double incomes, and double income is always better than not double income. that are joined together, and therefore like usually that does result in a significant amount of wealth accumulation. And then also they're not hoarding that money. They're not just sitting on that money. They're spending it on their kids and their family. So it's sort of a constant churn. So of course there was lots of advantages given to nuclear families because they're profitable.
Yep.
So yeah, a lot of emphasis and focus. So there's reasons why the family was put up on this pedestal, but there's also a lot of damage that was done as a result of that. And
yes,
it genuinely affected the video game industry in some very significant ways. So I would definitely look into it more, just dig into like how family has how this idea of family has affected gaming. And you can actually see that like as that idea of family began to erode in the cultural consciousness and began to expand to something more than just the nuclear family, some positive, it kind of correlates, whether it's there's a causal link or not. There's definitely a correlation to, video games becoming more and more acceptable form of entertainment as well. Yeah, millennials, we did something right. A couple things right. Video games and making family more an inclusive thing. So, maybe, I don't know. We'll see. Cool. All right, well, let's move on to our next question is, how has gaming's role in the family changed in the recent years? By recent years, I mean, 20 years or so, like, right? 2000 on.
Right. Yeah, two major things have happened. The advent of the software for smartphones. I meant to say smartphones.
Oh, yeah.
The advent of smartphones and smartphone games have increased the exposure of video games to every single person in society, which then changed the parental outlook of what a video game can be by introducing them to things like Candy Crush and Angry Birds and kids and
words with
interactions
friends and things, right? Like things, social gaming on a very, very casual platform. And yeah, totally.
Have reduced or like tore down that barrier of entry to gaming in general to like older.
Right. Why are you going to look down
boomers
on your
and
kids
Gen
for
X's?
playing games when you're sitting there playing it on your phone to pass the time? Like I think it definitely made parents and like you said, boomers and grandparents and everything more sympathetic to games because like they're actually experiencing them for the first time because they found something that like helps them occupy their brain for a period of time.
Hilariously enough, like boomers and the silent generation played the crap out of some solitaire back on Windows 95 and 3.1, but they wouldn't acknowledge that as a video game. I digress.
No, yeah, that's a good point.
And then the other thing was Nintendo with the Wii, like the entire 2006 through, was it 2013 when the Wii U had come out, that entire generation, the Wii outsold everything. It was the most dominant console in that entire generation. And the reason why is because they appealed to family. They appealed to including every single person in your household, regardless of generation, with like Wii Sports and Brain Age and all of the accessible motion control type things, reducing the amount of complexity by reducing buttons. Like it's not a button anymore. It's just a wand that you can hold and wave, and you can bowl and you can play golf and you can box with your friends and your family. And that allowed things like Just Dance to come from Ubisoft to allow the family. And then there was a whole generation of like musical instruments through Guitar Hero and Harmonix's Rock Band 1, 2, 3, and all through those, like that whole allowed all those band games and like rhythm games and like dancing and motion controls and sports games that they just brought the family together. So that was the first time we saw consoles like allowing grandma to come over for Thanksgiving and like, let's throw up Wii bowling. And the kids at the youngest ages, 5 and 6 year olds, are bowling with grandparents in the 80s and 70s. Like, it really connected all of the generations together for the first time ever in like society with when it comes to video games and what it can do.
I give Nintendo a hard time about their business decisions on a regular basis, but like they broke down the wall, right? Like they were the ones to first say like, hey, let's stop marketing towards just little a-holes who are constantly in emotional flux due to their surging hormones. Instead, let's like try to make our product appealing to exactly the groups you're describing, to the family, and boy did it work.
Oh yes.
like boy was that a successful strategy, and has long-term dividends as well, because again, now gaming is something seen not as just something for prepubescent boys, but now for something that everyone can enjoy. You just got to find the right games, right? So we're actually, again, this is an idea that's going to be talked about, I think, more in our podcast coming up in a couple of various episodes. But the other big effect, way it's changed, right, is just the simple fact that, like, the very people that, you know, derided us for playing games when we grew up, they're no longer the driving familial people anymore, right? Like, our parents were boomers and now they're grandparents.
Yep.
And the family is now run, so to speak, you know, at a broad level. The family is now run by Gen Xers and millennials, and Gen Xers were the trailblazers before us. Like Gen X, you know, people born in the, you know, late 70s, early 80s, they have about a decade on us as gaming parents, right? Like they grew up playing games in the 80s and 90s, and now they are parents.
Mm-hmm.
Their tastes are a little different than our millennial tastes, but like they were the parents before us that were the first generation to be raised playing video games, exposed to video games, and having video games as an influencer in their lives. And they, like, I think they were the ones to first really start to introduce like their kids to games as something that's like, this is part of our family life. This is part of the enjoyment we get out of life. Mm-hmm. And now it's multiplied tenfold as a result of millennials are now becoming parents. We have kids and we're introducing our kids to games, and we're making gaming part of the daily lives of our family as something that we do together. And passing on our tastes to our kids. And like, literally, again, this is just another example of just like history repeats itself. Like, every major advancement in art and entertainment has been met by the previous generation with derision, right? And like, literally, novels at one point were seen as something that like kids were getting into that was just complete trash. You should be reading historical accounts, blah blah blah, history, literature, whatever. Like, and then novels came out that were like popular fiction, and people were like, this is stupid. You know, the older generation were like, this is stupid, and it's gonna erode the brains of our children. Like, literally, it happens with every single advancement in entertainment and art and culture. Like, so it's, of course it happened with video games, and it's just the fact that video games are the newest version of it. You know, movies, comics, TV, all of it at one point was looked down upon by the previous generation as something that's going to destroy the youth and destroy the family. And it never does. It never does it do that. So that's, I think, the way it's changed is like, now the people who grew up with it are parents themselves. And it's just part of life now for most families, I think. So for better, for good, or for ill, which is our next question. What are the positive impacts, pros, so to speak, of gaming's role in the family? And what are some of the negative possible impacts of gaming's role in the family?
As you had mentioned, the cross-generational connection. It's Gen X parent comes over and plays with a niece or nephew of a millennial sibling who's like, let's play this game together. And it's Mario Kart. It's like Fortnite online together. Yeah. It's like Fallout 76 or any of the Destiny, any of the myriad of online games as a service type stuff. However you want to look at it, it's Words with Friends on your phone. It's connecting completely. It's allowing connections and interactions to happen with no physical barriers. And given COVID and how the pandemic has affected our society and isolated us physically, gaming has allowed us all to stay completely connected, whether you're watching a Twitch stream and your favorite streamer, or you're connecting with your grandma over. There's so many different ways that video games can allow like connectivity within the family, to allow relationships to foster and grow and have fun together, and just take your mind off of the stuff that's happening in the world and have like a connection. It's like,
right. There's a reason
totally
that, like,
the pro.
There's like a biological imperative to play together that is like present in almost all mammals specifically, but also very present in humans. And yeah, that's why you can expand the idea and the sort of galvanizing like power of video games. You can expand that to all kinds of different types of games. Like, it's a reason why families get together and play touch football on Thanksgiving. It's a reason why people play D&D with their family members or friends online on Roll20. It's the reason why board games are so popular and have always been so popular as a family activity. They were seen as a family activity long before video games were seen as a family activity. It's because play has a role in relationships. Play has a role in social interaction. It's the idea of like challenging each other together, whether it's cooperatively or competitively. It's the idea of like all of these things exist to like stretch our limits and capacity and allow us to like demonstrate that to others. And so, yeah, whether the games are literally about like Twitch reaction time, you know, Smash Bros. Or first person shooters, or whether it's about how well you can think through a problem together, like card games that are like escape rooms or whatever, right? Like these are all just various ways of demonstrating our skills to one another as a collective. And that has an incredible like social power with people. It's, play and fun is something that's never going to go away in humans. And video games are just the newest technology that allows us to do that on a different level. So, I agree. But I mean, again, we've talked about the dark sides of gaming before. Like there are, and those dark sides are probably the most impactful on our close relationships. Gaming addiction is a thing like never before. Games are actually designed to be more addictive than they ever were before. And that causes a lot of conflict in families. And you have to be cognizant as a parent. You have to be very cognizant of that. As a child, you have to like think about how like your relationship with your parent could be impacted by what you do. I know mine was, you know, like I'm not talking just from a philosophical level here. I'm talking from an experiential level. I had a lot of conflict growing up with my dad, and we were too similar and too different, if that makes sense. We were too similar in the ways that we related to people and like used our language as a weapon. And then we were also too different in the sense that we had very different interests and very different like outlooks on life. And so, we constantly fought. And one of the things we constantly fought the most over was how I spent my time and how I wanted to spend my time. And my dad was like a man's man growing up. He was, you know, in the Air Force, and he was, you know, a hardworking father and product of his generation. And I have the utmost respect for my father and his life experiences. But he had no respect for mine as a kid. And so he thought that I should be out there like learning how to fix cars and like, you know, chasing girls and dating girls and being out in the wild and being a man's man, right? Like, and I was like, I wanted to play games and watch anime and read comic books and read other books. And he did not. We just butted heads. And I don't blame him necessarily. I blame him for some of his choices that he made as a result of those feelings, but I also blame him. I don't necessarily blame him for not understanding my reality. But again, it caused conflict, and that's my point. Is like no matter who's in the right or who's in the wrong, when it comes to games, sometimes your parents are going to be absolutely right about how you spend your time. My dad was right. I needed to take care of my responsibilities, like mowing the lawn, and not play Warcraft 3 for hours on end on any given day. But like also, there's sort of the fact that like, you know, parents don't necessarily understand their kids' interests, and like I, as a parent now, don't want to repeat those mistakes. And I don't want to. It's going to look different, obviously, because I'm more sympathetic towards games as a whole. But what if my kid's into racing games and I hate racing games? Like, no, you can't spend your time doing that. I don't want to buy that crap game for you because I don't like it. Like, that's just as damaging as what my dad did to me, right? It's just a simple fact of like not understanding their interests and not sympathizing with them. It's just a different flavor of that dysfunction. And so again, it can be the root of so many conflicts. And it's not that the games themselves are bad because of that, but it's that the games by their nature sometimes bring out the worst in us.
Yep.
And again, not necessarily a problem of the games, but definitely something to consider when thinking about the role that gaming has in your family.
Two things about that. I want to walk through the generational timeline of gaming, cons of gaming's role in a person.
Sure.
But I also want to look at the fact that you could swap video games out with other things and the problem's still there. So we'll get to the second thing in a minute. The first thing is like generationally. So as a child who loves games, or a child in general, it's school. School is your responsibility. It's the main thing that gets you as a hireable person in society. It's something that you should emphasize. You should spend your time in. You should get good grades. You should be focusing on that aspect of it. And then gaming kind of distracts you from those things. So like children, gaming takes away time from school. That's a problem. So that can cause a parent to look down on like gaming in general as I have rules around and barriers and boundaries, etc. I am a millennial gamer. I loved video games as a child. I played video games throughout my schooling, but I always had good grades. I always did my homework. I was always responsible. And now I'm a parent of children, and I'm aware of the distracting nature of video games, especially in my young sons. And so I limit their game time on school nights to preserve, kind of protect, and emphasize like the responsibility, you have to clean your room, you need to do your schoolwork, you need to focus on school, and then you can play video games. Grow up into like teenager when you're like self identity and your social life matters more than anything. And that's like late high school and college time where you're starting to think about like your career forming, but you're also trying to like build social relationships that will go with you the rest of your entire life. And so like video games can distract you from those things. So you might not be dating, you might not be out there finding your best friends in the whole world because you're distracted by games. You might not get the career path set. You might be distracted from getting jobs, job applications, job interviews, etc. because of video games. And so like that can be a problem. And then like early adulthood, maybe you do land that job, maybe you do get that degree, and now you have all the free time in the world because all you do is work and you have tons of money. So it's like spending money on video games and spending time playing games now distracts you from the role of like establishing your household, whatever that looks like. If you don't want to get married, that's fine. If you don't want to have kids, that's great. But whatever that is, like being a respectable, responsible adult in this world that contributes to society, like gaming can distract you from those things. And they all affect everything differently. And you and I are both married. We both have children. So now it's like, as a spouse of whatever, like if you're a spouse, your video gaming habits can distract you from that relationship. And so the other end of that is the person on the other end of that relationship feels jealous or jaded in your attention because you're spending too much time playing games with your friends or whoever. And
maybe
then
it'll be different real quick if you have a sidebar, because I want to talk about spousal relationships real quick.
Yeah.
Because that's a part of family relationships, right? And maybe it'll be different for the next generation. Maybe Gen Z or our kids' generation, whatever that ends up being labeled as. Maybe they'll have it differently because games are just so much more ubiquitous that like there'll be a larger percentage of them that were exposed to it. But I still feel like our generation was the flip a coin generation, right?
I think so too. Yeah,
and
I
so
agree.
I think that you're more likely if you see two millennial parents, it's likely that one. I would say it's still kind of rare to see like two parents that were both like huge gamers. And again, that could be a point of which two people like fall in love, right? Like that's still totally something that absolutely happens. And if you're married to it, if you're a gamer that's married to a gamer out there, like, I'm jealous of you. Not gonna lie, I'm a little jealous. And that's awesome that is something that has formed a basis of your relationship. But for both of us, I can say that we're both married to non-gamers. And not that necessarily causes conflict, because I think both of us work it out, and it's totally possible to work it out. But I know that both of us would still love for our spouse to spend time playing games with us, right? Like that is something that I think we both would want. And it's interesting to see how that might change, just because, again, games are so much more ubiquitous for Gen Z and the generation of our kids.
And it's a great segue into my second point about you can swap video games out with anything else.
Yeah.
And so like I think the millennial generation is the first one that's more alike. The chances of two people being gamers together in a relationship, in a monogamous relationship, whether they're married or not, like the chances of that happening have increased dramatically from Gen X to millennials. And then like from millennials to Gen Zers, it's pretty much going to be, like you said, ubiquitous at that point. And so like gaming might be the core of the fun that they do together. But in the past, like if you remove video games, what was the thing that like got couples together in the past? Like maybe it was movies, maybe it was fishing or hunting, or like owning a boat and going out. Maybe it was traveling and exploring the world or hiking. Like there's so many other activities, books, like comics, bring couples together, and it's just a way of spending time. The only reason why, sports too. Of course, especially through college, where it's like your best friends were on the football teams, and like those people who were your best friends then went on to the NFL, and so you have an alliance with an NFL team, and you watch that and you follow them.
Is interesting because the gender divide also sort of at least the perceived gender divide definitely previously existed in sports, and still to this day kind of does. And that's sort of similar to games, where it's like it's sort of expected that the guy, of course, was into sports, but the woman hated it, right? And there's sort of that sort of perception still with gaming. Trope, totally. This sort of like unfair, but that's eroding now, and it's probably eroding a lot faster in gaming culture than it ever did in sports.
Yep.
Because there's still, even to this day, it's like if I meet a couple and it's very clear that the husband is into sports, my immediate assumption is that the wife is not, even if that's not actually true. So like, but yeah, the fact that there was a gender divide even in sports is kind of the parallel to gaming is actually very true. But there's so many couples out there. Again, I would almost say that that's an incorrect perception for sports now, because so many couples are just into sports together. Football, hockey, basketball, baseball, whatever it is. Yeah. So yeah, good point.
And same with video games. So like the cons of gaming's role in the family, like I walked through that. So at every level of generation, from like being a child through adulthood, and whether you're a spouse or a parent, and like how gaming can distract you from the responsibilities of all of the things that other people require of you. I get like that's kind of the con of gaming, but I don't think it's video games specifically is the reason for that. I feel like there's other things at play. You can swap out gaming with anything else, sports, recreation, hobbies, etc. There's going to be something that distracts a person from their responsibilities, whether they're video games or not.
The one thing that is video games' fault.
Video games.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that is video games' fault is they are designed to be addictive, and now more than ever, they're designed to actually like trick kids into stealing their credits or their parents' credit cards, right? Like, and that is a thing that can absolutely destroy a family in seconds. That's what scares me, right? Is like, not that necessarily that I'm going to make bad choices in that vein, but like you hear those horror stories of families that are just devastated because some freaking cell phone game was designed that just hit the right buttons in a kid's mind that it was already predisposed to be addictive, like to respond to addictive things. And then like that kid got a hold of their parents' credit card and made a bunch of purchases, and that, ruined the family's financial like prospects. Like, that's terrifying. And that is game's fault. And that is a very real, tangible, like, and it may only happen rarely, but like even at a micro level, that's a thing that can cause conflict, that can ultimately, really devastate and ruin those relationships, erode that trust and that sense of security, and just cause just awful things to happen within a family, even if it's not happening at like a crazy, like I lost thousands of dollars because my kid spent it on Candy Crush. Like that may not happen to everybody, but like this sort of spirit of like these, games are designed sometimes to games are designed to exploit our worst impulses sometimes, and that can cause conflicts that will just erode the family, the familial love and trust and security that's supposed to be the foundation, the bedrock of a family. So being aware of those things, and again, like being aware of those things, and also like holding those developers to task, like not the developers, the publishers, holding them to task, and either not purchasing those games and voting with your wallet, so to speak, or just like, being willing to like speak up about like those things, I think is really important. So
I think we're past the worst of that.
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. It probably is rose-colored glasses, like optimistic, hopeful, like, oh, cute. Termite thinks we're past the best. It's maybe. Look at how EA has changed and shifted gears, and look at monetization practices, and like Marvel's Avengers from Square Enix just went through a thing where they had to pay to boost experience gains, and like they had to take that away because it was like predatory and how it was monetizing the speed at which you gain experience. And like I feel like microtransactions in general and like predatory gaming practices towards kids and like lots of protections have been lifted and raised. I think we're getting better at this, and I think Gen Z and millennials will kind of drive this point home. Like Gen Xers were the ones that probably fell victim to the preying of on by so that's it. So awesome. There you go.
All right, well, our probably our final question here, the one that I think is at least of the two that we have left, the more valuable one, is how do you think that your relationship to gaming has changed as your familial role changed? So what does gaming look like? Well, again, whether it's personal or just intellectual, like, do you think that like your relationship to gaming changes as you become, go from being a child to a parent, or as a young kid to an adolescent? How does that relationship to gaming change as more responsibilities are thrown your way by your parents? And even as a spouse, how do you think that like your relationship, again, the idea of marriage and is this idea that you're kind of going out on your own and starting a new family unit, and that totally impacts your relationship to gaming as you're now leaving your family unit. What was your nuclear family now becomes your extended family, and you become a new family with your wife that starts out as two and becomes more. That, like, how does that affect your relationship to gaming as you go through all those different roles? And you can speak it either personally to your life, or you can apply it to how you think it happens on a broader scale. So that's the
The
last
best
question.
way for me to answer this question is personally. So
Of course. Which is why
context changes the relationship entirely. For example, I have very little time to play video games in general. This means in order to get like the same fulfillment and accomplishment out of gaming, I have to make a lot out of a little. So I am a father of two, and I am married, so I have my spouse to take care of as well, or slash the relationship to take care of. Like, a relationship needs cultivation, it needs attention, it needs, like, that's objective. That's every relationship, it needs something. So being someone who's married, that relationship is obviously going to take precedent over other things. So now I would like, my video game habits went from I want to sink into something deeply and I want to complete everything and I want to sink into this world and I want to absorb this story, is now evolved into like I have so many other responsibilities now that I need quicker and easier experiences. So that's what's ideal. I can't play like whatever I want.
Yeah.
I still have to accomplish the ultimate goal of finishing games and earning trophies and things like my Enneagram 3 like achiever. I need to, if I spend money on a game, I need to feel like I've achieved the thing that I've spent my money on to like feel worthwhile in my purchase. And like trophies is a way that I can log and document and look back on like my gaming habits and what I've done and like how I appreciate gaming and how I take gaming seriously and those things. That's a whole different topic. So like it makes games like, for example, how it has really changed. So you have harped on me so much about the Soulsborne genre and like how you're dying for me to get into these games because you know that I will love them and I will adore them and I will experience that and I will have a fantastic time. But like you said, how
I don't know it, but
I know, but that's a
suspect
rightful expectation because you know me. You've known me for like 7 years now. You know the games. Like you have a very valid expectation that if I were to play those games that I would love them because you know who I am and you know my tastes. And I don't disagree with that at all. But what makes like, so you go back to how does your relationship to gaming change as your familiar role changes as a husband of 2 children and a wife and a full-time worker, or
husband of 2 children.
yeah, whatever. I don't
How
know what I
strong
just
was
said,
that
but
beer?
hey, so like difficult games or like games with high difficult barriers of entry are now extremely frustrating. They would not have been in the past because I would have had the patience to get over that difficulty curve. So they shouldn't be as frustrating as they are. But because my gaming time is so limited, now those things are like exponentially more like crap and like so hard for me to get into. And I did not get the Kana a Bridge of Spirits Platinum Trophy because of the Master Difficulty mode. Like, I don't have time for that. Final Fantasy VII Remake's DLC has, like, extra hard mode fights that I just gave up on. Like, it's my favorite game of all time. It's Final Fantasy VII. And its remakes, awesome extra boss fights in its DLC are so hard that I have to spend so much time grinding and, like, it's so frustrating. It's the reason for my apprehension for all of the Souls-like games because of that difficulty curve. And in the same way, context can change family relationships and how you devote your time. Like during the pandemic, I was working from home every single day. So I was with my family and my wife and my kids, and like my wife didn't work, so she was around. There was a lot of already like built-in organic quality free time with them. So it was very easy for me to say, hey, I've spent all this time with y'all. I would like some time to myself. I would like to go play some video games on the side. And it was usually met with like, no problem. I get it. You've filled all of our buckets. Like you have had great quality time with everyone here. You can have some time to yourself. So now that the pandemic's kind of over-ish, I mean, like it's still going on, obviously, but things have returned to more normal. I'm back to the office every day. And like my wife's now done with grad school, so she's home every night. So there's pressure from spouses that can come up when jobs get busy, and then like video game time is not looked at so easily and can cause tension and stress. And so it evolves, like the context of relationships and how gaming works. So now I don't get time in the evenings to play games because my wife's mostly at home and she's free. And so I feel that I want to and need to spend time with her in the evenings, and I don't get as much time to play games on my own like I used to because I'm at work full time and she's with the kids all day. And so it's this whole thing. And that's all
Yeah,
like
and
family and video games. It's
sure,
crazy complicated.
sure, yeah, and I'll give my hopefully very short answer to this question is like, how does your relationship to gaming change as your familiar role changed? I think I can answer it in one basic word, which is introspection. And maybe this is only true for like people like you and me that tend to already be introspective and analyze things from an intellectual level. Maybe it's not true for everyone, but I do think that like as your role changes, you're more likely to really think hard about what you want out of your experiences and what you want out of your time. And I think that I could sum it up by just simply saying that like you become more thoughtful about games. As a kid, you and as a young person, like honestly, I'm not even going to try to pretend like you should be doing what we're doing, right? Like if you are a kid or a teenager, like enjoy this stage of life where you can just follow your impulses, right? Like you can stay up till 4 a.m. when on a weekend drinking Mountain Dew and playing Halo or whatever it is
Yeah.
game you're into,
All
Fortnite.
the needs of the house are met. All your
Yep.
clothes are washed. Your food is taken care of. You have nothing. Just stay up to 4 a.m. and play games and sleep all day.
Indulge in it, right? Because it goes away, and that's why whenever you hear parents or adults say like enjoy this time, like I know it can sound condescending, but like they mean it, like right, and this is
because every adult wants to go back to that.
Good, but it's good. Like it's a good thing to be like that game that when you get older and your role changes, that it forces you responsibility forces you to realize that like I need to think about this more. And that the answers, thinking about it is just asking questions, and then the answers are different for everybody. And again, my hope for anybody in that position is that they answer it in the best way that suits the needs of those around them as well as their own. Balance is that you're seeking a balance, right? Because in order to take care of others around you, you also need to take care of yourself to some level. And so like, what is that balance for you is going to be different for everybody. And going to express itself differently. But yeah, I mean, that's it. That's ultimately the answer is like, it's going to change whether you like it or not. And either it's going to change in a way that will be destructive to your family, or it'll be a change. It'll change in a way that will be constructive, or maybe it'll just be changing in a way that will result in neutrality. And like, it's going to look different for everybody, but I think that really sort of lands on the answer, and me and my wife, this entire topic, this idea really hits at something that I've been thinking a lot about, which is this idea of like, how can gaming reach non-gamers, right? And that's something that like is going to just happen naturally for the next generation, like you said, like you already hit on. Like I don't think Gen Z is gonna have to think about this as much, but I'm thinking about it as a millennial married to someone who is not a gamer, who has like as of right now has very little interest in games. But as me and my wife have been talking about our relationship and about our relationship within our family, within the context of our family, we've been, my wife even said recently, like, she's like, I would play games with you if you made that something you wanted to do. Like if you like took the time to like pick a game and play it with me, I would do it and I would learn it. And so that's got me thinking, like, again, I think a really healthy thing, especially as you think about family, is like, okay, like number one, how do we teach gamers? Or sorry, how as gamers do we teach non-gamers the fundamentals of gaming? But number two, how do we tailor that experience to the person we're trying to teach? Because taste comes into play. Like I was thinking about how like Resident Evil 2 remake would actually be a really good way of introducing someone to shooters, because most of the targets in the early game are shambling zombies, and they're fairly easy and predictable.
Slow, and you can aim and
line up, teach someone how to line a headshot up. But when I was thinking about that, I was like, that would be perfect for teaching shooters to a non-gamer. But then I thought, but I know my wife, and she would never in a million years play a game that scary, right? So it's the idea that like gaming can be something that brings people together, but you have to think about the other person, I guess, is the bottom line, right? And so I've just been thinking a lot about, like, I don't have any answers yet. It's just been something that's been on my mind, is like, my wife has said she'd play games with me. But I think about all the times we've tried to do that and how like frustrating it can be for both of us, because I'm a gamer and have all these habits and knowledge, and because she's not. It's like, and not that it causes necessarily like drama or discord, but it just isn't the experience that you necessarily think about when you're like, man, I look forward to playing games with my family. And so then I extend that to my children. What will it look like? What if they're not into the games that I'm into? What if I have a harder time teaching them? What if there's frustration that comes about as a result of that? What if their learning style is completely different than my teaching style? There's no resources out there to help you navigate this. So it's definitely something that is a really, really big thing to think about and talk about. So that is all we have time for, I think. So I'm going to make a hard cut there and say that, like, if you have thoughts and if this conversation has inspired you to think about this topic in a way you may have not before, we want to hear about it. So please, Termite, remind our listeners and Pod Smashers where they can reach out to us if they have thoughts and ideas related to gaming and the family.
On this Thanksgiving holiday, when you have distanced yourself from your family because you dropped a political bomb and no one wants to talk to each other anymore, and you're done with your family, and you've recluded to us, and you found us here, you can find a lot more of our episodes, as we have been going for more than 4 years, over at 80bitpodsmash.com. You can escape into any of our various topics. 80bitpodsmash.com. It's not sequential. Jump in wherever you feel like a topic that piques your interest. Jump into our episodes and check it out. Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, or Google Play, as well as Apple Podcasts are all of our podcast platforms. But if you want to interact and give us your feedback, thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, and ideas, you can do that through our social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Twitter, and we have a Discord server in the links of all of our show notes where you can start a conversation with us to stay glued to your phone in order to avoid talking to your family because you just dropped that political bomb. So please go do that.
Or someone else dropped a political bomb and you just want
and you need to get out. If you need to get out, we're here for you.
Hey, listen,
we get it.
I like to think of our Pod Smash community as our family. I mean, that may be like overly sentimental and kind of cliche, but screw it. It's the time of year to be overly sentimental and cliche. So like, y'all are our family. So like, we want to engage with our family and talk and have conversations. So that's fine. Anyways, next week we're talking about the topic that Termite was just briefly hitting on, why he doesn't want to get into. So we're gonna be hitting on Termite's absolute favorite genre, video games, not in the form of a deep dive like we do with many other genres, but in a much more loose discussion. We're gonna be talking about Souls-likes and roguelikes, two genres that are named have similar enough attributes to lump together, but also are like desperately in need of a name change. We'll talk about all that and more next week on November 29th.
We will see you next week.